Welcome to Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
We're going to start out our sports podcast today with the first of a couple of business news stories. Clemson and Florida State seem to realize that they no longer have leverage with the ACC. You might have been hearing some news reports the last couple of days. Very vague reports, so it's hard to even call them reports. It's almost like we're just reporting rumors now, but that's fine. The details are such as they are. Officials at Clemson and Florida State are talking with the ACC about alternatives to these silly lawsuits that the two schools filed against the ACC. The ACC then countersued. Clemson and Florida State, the background on this is that the two schools separately have sued the ACC, saying that the exit fees and grant of media rights agreements that they signed in 2015 were onerous and that they needed to be able to get out from under them and to be able to do so without having to pay $500 to $600 million for the privilege. The lawsuits are going nowhere at this stage. It will be several years before anything would ever get to an actual trial level. We're still trying to figure out venue, and it's the court system can be that slow. And so one of the cases actually it had a ruling from the judge saying, okay, go to mediation. Let's start this mediation process. And apparently the mediation process has led to some actual discussion. And it's basically, I mean, I could go into detail. I don't think I need to, but in essence, the ACC's thrown out the bone of, okay, we'll give you a chance to make more money based on your success on the field and your TV viewer numbers. Simple as that. I mean, so the ACC has already worked into a revenue sharing agreement that, for many years, obviously, this is the way it works in other sports leagues. The share of TV money goes out equally to everybody. And the ACC's done that, and folks have been happy with that. But now Clemson and Florida State say, we're falling behind. The whole ACC's falling behind, but we're falling behind our peers in the SEC and Big Ten. We need to be able to make more money to be able to compete on the football field, particularly. And so the ACC developed a revenue sharing model, which would reward success on the field. This would be another pot of money that would be more focused on TV viewer numbers. Fine. Not sure too many people are going to be viewing Florida State games the rest of this year after an 0-3 start against the likes of Georgia Tech, Boston College, and Memphis, but that's a dig. The reporting floating out on this is that in addition to that, the ACC would consider shortening the end date on the grants of media rights, which currently go through 2036. Everybody agreed to that back in 2015 when the new TV contract was set to start in 2016. And I'm not gonna say I'm buying that as being anything more than a bargaining chip, if it's even that, and actually being discussed at all. Uh, because Florida State and Clemson have no leverage here. The money that they're wasting and the money that the ACC's having to waste in response maybe is the only bit of leverage that they've got, and just the frustration that the ACC would feel and does feel over having to defend and the member schools having to spend money defending an agreement that they all got into voluntarily. Um, so it's almost like this is an olive branch slash here you can claim victory so everybody can move on kind of maneuver from the ACC. And I think that's what this is. Um, and here's the bigger point, and I make this point a lot when I address this issue in columns. Nothing from this stupid distraction does anything to resolve the bigger issue at hand for the ACC and its member schools. That the new TV deals for the Big Ten and SEC are paying those conferences and member schools considerably more than what the ACC is able to get and give out to its member schools. And that's under the current ESPN deal, which has 12 years left on it this year and 11 more years after this one. It's been mentioned in a lot of these articles this week about this Clemson, Florida State, and ACC reaching some sort of an agreement to talk more. That there's the February 2025 deadline for ESPN to decide what it's going to do with the last decade of the contract. And the implication here is ESPN would walk away. No, they're not walking away. This deal is too good for ESPN. They are making SEC level money and not paying out SEC level money. This is great deal for ESPN. They can't wait. I can't believe they haven't already exercised their option on this, but you know, maybe it's just a formality, or maybe they've already done it and we just haven't heard because those kind of things don't get announced until somebody wants to announce it. I have been good in Virginia at filing Freedom of Information Act requests. It's harder to do that at the national level, right? But my sense is if the deal's not already in place, they've pretty much already told the ECC what they're going to do, and they just haven't signed the paperwork yet. Um, and just to get this out there, uh, if there's any reduction on this grant of media rights, the length of it that is supposedly being talked about as an olive branch out there to Clemson and Florida State, ESPN would have to sign off on it too because the TV contract is tied to those grants of media rights. There's no value to the TV contract if anybody can leave when they want to. That's why you sign a grant of media rights deal. It's just basic stuff. So the best case scenario for Clemson and Florida State out of this, as long as they're not getting blown out by Georgia, choking at home against the AAC, they can make a few more bucks by winning and having people stay with their games on Saturdays. That's it. And no, just to answer this question, none of this is going to do anything to lure Notre Dame into being a full-fledged football member of the ACC. So we have that going for us. Coming up after the break, we'll talk some more sports business news involving the wrestling company All Elite Wrestling. So please stick around. Several published reports have the AEW-Warner Bros. Discovery deal that's been talked about for months, if not the last couple of years, on the verge of being announced, whether it's the next few days, next week or two. And the deal is worth, or going to be worth, reportedly in the $170 million range, and it will go 3 or 4 years. So that would be a little lower than Tony Khan had been speculating about publicly, or at least been speculated to be speculating about publicly, both in terms of the amount of money and also the length of the deal. It'd be less too than what WWE is getting for its flagship shows, but it would be more than double what AEW is currently getting from WBD on its deal that was signed back in 2019. So that 2019 deal originally was for 45 million a year. It was just basically get in the door kind of deal. And then it expanded to 70 million a year when AEW and WBD gave basically more TV time. At first, it was Dynamite on Wednesday nights. Then there was the debut of Rampage in 2021 and the later edition of Collision in 2023. Now, I wrote a piece on these numbers back in July. I was at that time commenting on the word I got out there, an estimate from a gentleman named Austin Karp, who writes for Sports Business Journal, who was talking on Busted Open Radio at that time. He expected that AEW would get between 110 million and 115 million a year with a new TV deal. And when I started doing the math, I came up with a much bigger figure. And I wanted to explain the details of the math I did. It started with Netflix agreeing to a 10-year, $5 billion deal to acquire the rights to Raw. That's $500 million a year. NBC Universal then got the right to SmackDown away from Fox, $1.4 billion deal over 5 years, $280 million a year. And then a throw-in, WWE is moving NXT to the CW network for $25 million a year. So using the viewer numbers for each of those shows, I try to come up with a somewhat educated guess on what AEW could expect. What I came up with is this, and this is all spelled out on a story on the website. For those watching on YouTube, there's a link in the description that you can go to, and you can see these numbers. But I'll go over them here. Based on what Netflix has agreed to pay for, and assuming that Netflix is going to keep Raw at 3 hours, what they're going to pay for Raw, it comes to $3.2 million per hour of content. And that's based on what USA Network's currently getting for Raw, which is 1.7 million viewers. It'll be interesting to see how many people go to Netflix and watch it both live and then I guess throughout the week, because Netflix, you can watch Netflix live, you can watch anything at this day and age with on demand and that kind of thing. But the 1.7 million viewers is based on live viewers. And so, okay, so 3.2 million per hour for Raw. NBC Universal is going to be paying 2.7 million per hour for an hour of SmackDown. Right now, that audience is at about 2.4 million on Fox, but that's on broadcast TV. I'm basing my 2.7 million per hour on the numbers for Raw because SmackDown, and it could even be lower. The viewer numbers for SmackDown could and probably will be lower than even Raw because SmackDown will be on Friday nights. Friday nights not a big TV night. Uh, but that's just the estimate, 2.7 million per hour. The CW is getting a deal. The WWE just gave CW a deal, 240,000 an hour to reach its 650,000 or so viewers per week. So AEW is currently getting around 700,000 for Dynamite, 400,000 on average for Collision, and around 300,000 for its Rampage show, which is in a horrible time slot, Friday night at 10 o'clock Eastern. Those viewer numbers are closer to where NXT is. But my basic math here is that if if WWE was smart, they would have held out a little bit more and gotten closer to $100 million a year, up to about $110 million a year for NXT, if they weren't just trying to give that away, which is apparently what they were doing. Uh, so using all those numbers, AEW currently provides WBD a total of 5 hours of TV per week. Um, if put the number of what the average hour of AEW programming is based on their number of viewers, I put it at about $825,000 per hour, which works out to $4.1 million a week or $215 million for the year. So I wrote this story and I'm re-examining it now because someone who's pretty smart estimated that AEW would probably get in the range of 110 to 115 million per year. I suggested it was more like 215 million. That final number, if the number being reported and floated out there is true, 170 million is closer to where I was, certainly in the direction of where I was. Um, and I'll hedge here only in to say uh, there is still talk, speculation, etc., that AEW will not be done with an announcement involving WBD. The Tony Khan apparently is floating out another potential show. He's registered the name Shockwave and done some basic marketing to that name just to say we're going to shock the world kind of thing. There is the talk is that AEW is in conversations with Fox Sports 1 perhaps, Fox Sports 2 to have another weekly show there that could bring in some more money. So they could still get another 40 or 50 million dollars and maybe who knows, maybe more than that out of that. And the pay-per-view money also is still not, we don't know what's going to happen there. We don't know if AEW is going to bring that in-house, if a deal with WBD would put the pay-per-views on Max, which would that be included in the 170 million? Probably not. How much more money would AEW get for that part of the deal? There's still some money floating out there, I guess, is what we're saying, and it'll be something we're keeping an eye on as we continue to monitor the news of AEW. And the bottom line on this, AEW, if they're not going to be profitable based on what would be a massive infusion of cash, they're going to be a lot closer to it. And this is good news for wrestling fans. Even if you're not an AEW fan, if you're just a WWE fan, I say just, if you just like one company, I'm a one company guy. I don't watch WWE. Uh, but if you're a one company person and AEW is not your company, it makes the business better when there's more competition out there. And this would be the biggest deal for a non WWE / WWF company in TV history. So, and it just means more chances for wrestlers to get work, managers to get work, production people to get work. I like people who should be getting paid and paid well to be professionals at this to have a chance to do their thing. It's a good thing for everybody. Good thing for the fans as well. Uh, when we come back, one more part here of our sports podcast, we'll talk some UVA football. That's coming up next here on the show. Two bits here with UVA football. We're going to wrap up the 27-13 loss to Maryland from last week, look ahead to Coastal Carolina this week, a little bit looking ahead this week. Let's start with the report card for UVA football and the 27-13 loss to Maryland on Saturday night. The final stats don't tell the whole story or really any of the story in that loss for Virginia. Total offense, one measure of a game, basically the same. Maryland 391, UVA 370. Maryland had an issue with penalties, eight for 66 yards. UVA had two for 14 yards. The UVA had four turnovers. Maryland didn't have any turnovers. And Virginia's turnovers led to seven Maryland points and then also kept at least 3 points off of the scoreboard for UVA because one of those penalties was in the red zone. Maryland was 8 of 19 on third downs, 2 of 2 on fourth downs. In the second half, 5 of 10 on third downs and 2 of 2 on fourth downs. Essentially, facing third down or more on 10 times. They got the first down 7 times. That's how you dominate time of possession. They did had over 21 minutes of possession in the second half. They kept the sticks moving. It's hard when we can't get them off the field, and then you go back out there and you're frustrated, and your offense goes 3 and out. I mean, it just kills you. UVA was 1 of 7 on third downs in the second half, 0 of 1 on fourth downs, 3 of 15 for the game on third downs. Virginia got the ball in the red zone 4 times, got 2 field goals, 1 turnover, 1 touchdown, so 13 points. Maryland had 4 trips in the red zone, had 2 field goals, 2 touchdowns, 20 points. I mean, you add all this up, and the game was, I mean, statistically, it was closer than it felt like, certainly leaving the stadium the other night, but Maryland converted and Virginia didn't. So let's look, kind of roll through the grades here. Anthony Calandria, he has had 10 games where he wasn't a mop-up guy. He had one mop-up game, the season opener last year down in Nashville at Tennessee. Of the 10 games he's played where he's either been the starter or there was one game, the Georgia Tech game last year, where he came in early and played the rest of the game. Of those 10 games, he's had three with a sub 60 PFF grade, Pro Football Focus, and this was one of them. And it's just two of the three were against Maryland. So Maryland's got his number, I guess. 21 completions on the game, but 17 of them travel less than 10 yards in the air. Two of his four intermediate passes, 10 to 19 yards downfield, were intercepted. He did complete 3 deep balls. He was 3 of 8 for 117 yards on 20 plus yard through the air passes. Uh, Maryland put pressure on Calandria, 25 blitzes on the 43 dropbacks. And he was 12 of 21 for 164 yards and an INT on those snaps and was sacked twice. And gained 24 yards on 3 scrambles, had 7 yards on 2 design runs. The O-line, I thought, I mean, especially when I looked at the numbers, did its job. Maryland sent extra guys an awful lot, but only 15 of the 43 dropbacks were considered under pressure. So that's, they did their job. Center Brian Stevens had the clean sheet of the night, no quarterback hurries, pressures, anything. 68.9 PFF grade. Jack Whitmer did a great job. He has had to step in at left tackle for the first 3 games of the season, as Mikhail Boley, last year's starter at left tackle, projected starter for this year, has been dealing with an ankle injury suffered in training camp. Whitmer is a converted tight end. He was a tight end in the spring, and he put 50 pounds on over the summer, and he's playing left tackle, which is the blind side position on the offensive line in on a team with a right-handed quarterback, and he has done well. On Saturday night, 65 snaps. He allowed 2 QB pressures, graded out at 64.6. This is a guy, again, he's a senior. He barely played as a tight end in 3 years. And now he's playing line, and he's playing pretty well. The skill guys, 3 drops by the Virginia receivers, all were by the tight ends. Tyler Neville, 2 drops. He had 3 catches on 6 targets. Big catch. He had a 39-yard catch helping set up that touchdown right before halftime. But 2 drops that had to factor in. And Dakota Twitty, former 4-star wide receiver, moved to tight end in the spring. 1 target, and that was a drop. Malachi Fields had 4 catches on 10 targets, no drops. Just Calandria used him as the safety blanket, and they just weren't connecting. 4 catches, just went for 36 yards. Surprisingly quiet game for Fields. The backs put up good numbers when they were used. No doubt I'll say when they were used, they just weren't used much. And that's been an issue dating back a couple of administrations now. Of note, I noted this when I was looking through the numbers. 27 rushing attempts, 17 of those went to the left side of the line behind Whitmer and left guard Noah Josie. Now, I looked at the season numbers to see if that's a trend, and apparently it's not. 89 rushing attempts through 3 games this season, 46 to the left, 43 to the right. I'm pointing to my left and right. Now, there has been more success on runs to the left, averaging 5.5 yards per carry versus 4.4 yards running to the right. And back to the Maryland game, backup tailback Xavier Brown had the highest PFF grade. He had 43 yards on 7 tries. And then wrapping up, we'll talk some defense real quick. Defensive end Cam Butler had the highest grade at 90.0, 6 QB pressures and 5 tackles from the defensive end. That's a night right there. Cornerback Corey Thomas graded out 75.5. I say deceptive numbers. He allowed 7 catches on 8 targets, which does not sound good, but they were all short stuff right in front of him, and the catches only went for a total of 36 yards. So he did his job. All the short stuff, he kept it in front of him, and that's why he graded out well. Antonio Clary had a lower grade, 69.4, but he had really good numbers. 13 tackles, 2 catches allowed on 8 targets for just 8 yards through the air with 2 pass breakups. So good stuff there for Antonio Clary, who's really playing an important role as a guy on the back end there. Let's talk quickly some football injury report news. Cam Robinson, the 4-star linebacker, missed the game on Saturday. He had the knee sprain from the win at Wake the week before. Tony Elliott told reporters at his weekly presser on Tuesday that Robinson, quote, could be back this week, which is a hedge. Robinson has been on the field for a total of 57 snaps this season. As a true freshman last year, he had the 3rd best Pro Football Focus grade, and he did everything: 72 tackles, 10 QB pressures, 2 sacks, 2 INTs, a little bit of everything from Robinson. We need to get him back out there. Ty Furnish left in the second quarter of the Maryland game after 32 snaps. Without going into any detail, Elliott said Ty will be down, and he added it was a little more serious than what he was initially thinking. So that doesn't sound good. The UVA season stats list offensive lineman Charlie Patterson as having gotten into 2 games. I can't find any stats for him doing anything in the 2 games, either on offense or on special teams. But either way, Elliott listed him on the injury report. He'll be out for a couple weeks with an ankle sprain, according to Elliott. Cornerback Dre Walker, I noticed only played 2 snaps Saturday night. He's probable for Coastal Carolina. Injured his ankle in the game last week. Sudarian Harrison, the wideout, he had 1 13-yard catch on 13 snaps this season so far, is probably down another week with a hamstring injury, but he's progressing well, Elliott said. And the final update, I talked about Mikhail Boley a little earlier. Last season, 847 snaps at left tackle, 62.7 PFF grade. He's closer, Elliott said. I don't know if it'll be this weekend, but he's almost back. So, Mikhail Boley, just more Jack Whitmer, and Whitmer's playing well. No problems there. Well, that wraps up our sports for the day. If you have anything for me, any story ideas, tips, news ideas, comments, please feel free to email me at chris@augustafreepress.com.